gap between the best closed source models and the best open source model has narrowed to like 3 to 5% in a lot of these benchmarks.
Welcome to Scaling Without Breaking podcast, the show for startup leaders who are done winging it and sick of everything being a bottleneck. Your team's growing, the cracks are showing, and what got you here is officially breaking. Each week, you'll hear raw stories, sharp strategies, and real talk from founders, operators, and advisors who've scaled through chaos and built companies that run without constant firefighting. If you're ready to start leading like a CEO and move beyond just surviving, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Roland Siebelink.
Hello and welcome everyone. Here's yet another episode of Scaling Without Breaking. I'm Roland Siebelink, coach and advisor to many of the fastest growing startups around the world, as you heard. And I'm very honored to have an amazing guest today. He's won a gold medal at a math Olympiad in Bulgaria before he moved to the US. And then he spent a decade quietly building the backend for a chat app that's used by 200 million people every month. Now, instead of chasing a bigger title, he started over with a tiny team, building infrastructure for a technology that barely existed when they launched. Then ChatGPT happened, and suddenly his little startup was sitting in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar land grab, competing against companies with 10, 100 times the headcount and 1,000 times the funding. And yet, he is winning. With that, everybody meet my guest, Nikola Borisov, the CEO and co-founder of Deep Infra. Welcome to Scaling Without Breaking, Nikola.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rowan. Pleasure to be here.
Of course, it's and for those that are watching us on YouTube, I'm just wearing the Mid-Stage Accelerator hoodie, but Nikola is wearing this amazing racing jacket with a big logo of a oil company from my native country on the front, and a bank from Spain and everything. So, it's all free sponsorship for those people. I wish them the best with it. Nikola, let's talk about real business. Most people think the AI race is about who builds the best model. But you've been betting that the models become commodities and that the real race is infrastructure. What do you see that the model companies are missing?
First, I want to say that we're really bullish on the open source versus closed source models. And over the last 3.5 years, as we've been, running Deep Infra, we've seen a great advance in both categories, but we've seen the open source models like catch up closer and closer to the best closed source models. And if you look at like comparisons on artificial analysis and other sites, you will see that the top open source models are just a couple percent behind, and they're better than, I guess, the top versions from the closed source labs that are like 6 months old. There was a big risk when we were starting. Like, if we were running Deep Infra as an inference cloud, if we focus on a single model, if let's say OpenAI has the only good model, then there'll be a little business for us to do. But actually happy, and I think it's good for the world as a whole, that the technology of building these models doesn't seem to be as restrictive. So like number of open source labs have managed to produce very, very decent open source models.
Mm-hmm. When you say they're just a couple of percentages behind, can we express that a little bit in like months of delay, years of delay compared to the leaders in the field? Are they just like a year behind, just a couple of months behind? Where are they at where, let's say, OpenAI or Anthropic was like how much time ago?
So at the moment, my best kind of guess is they're around 6 months or less in quality. And the percentages are not complex things. Basically, when we build these AI models, we can test how good they are by giving them a test. The same way, you and I would have done like an SAT or something like that. And then you see how well the model can answer a set of questions. So there's many different benchmarks, some test coding, some test knowledge, and so on. But if you look across the board, I think that the gap between the best closed source models and the best open source model has narrowed to like 3 to 5% in a lot of these benchmarks out of 100. And I think basically we're about 6 months behind. So this is why we're really excited about inference and infrastructure. We've reached levels where the models are becoming really, really useful to many people. Obviously, they're disrupting the software development industry massively, but also like almost every other area as well. And so we believe a lot of time will be spent during inference, and building the right infrastructure for inference is like what we're really focused on.
You mentioned the term inference, which of course is very common in the AI field. But if you explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old, what does inference mean and how does it differ from the rest of the AI process?
Here's like a very simple explanation. I think an AI model has like two stages of its life. At some point, it gets trained, and that's similar to like, I'm going to use it like you and me going to school and learning things, right? And then after it finishes training and basically starts producing work, it starts running. And so running an AI model is called inference because it comes from the model essentially predicts something. In our current cases, it like predicts the next token, predicts the next kind of line of code. Inference is essentially just another word for running the AI models. And so it makes sense to me that we will be spending a bigger portion of the life of a model will be spent running it rather than training it. Like if we train a model for, let's say, a year and then we only use it for a month, it's really not great, right? Because you spend all this energy and resources training, but you only get kind of your usefulness happens when you're actually running or doing inference.
And when you hear about companies like Anthropic that have experienced gigantic growth, but that did not maybe order all the compute power in time, now they are in that conflict, as I understand it, between like how much do we spend on training new models. If we do too little, then we may fall behind. But on the other hand, we also have to serve all our customers that are looking to use our models.
Yeah, I think it's kind of really natural, like economic thing to happen, right? Like the usefulness of the thing they've already built is now quite high. So they generate a lot of value from inference or running what they've already trained. And the incremental, I guess, gains from training another model is somewhat lower. You have to kind of strike the balance for sure. But one thing you're right is we don't have enough GPUs or enough data centers or enough chips. And we spend a lot of our venture back dollars into the actual hardware because we think these things are essentially small factories for intelligence, and you need them to really be cost efficient as well. You need to own them rather than lease them.
So that's actually one other bet that you seem to be making, Nikola, that ultimately the inference of the models will be run by different companies and maybe even different infrastructure than those that are training the models.
The reason why I think that, or at least at some scale, this would be the case. Like, I think probably the biggest few people will still run their own. But I try to draw inspiration here for another kind of similar set of specialized clouds, like CDNs. So CDNs are content delivery networks. They're these specialized clouds that help you distribute content. And the biggest tech companies sometimes end up building their own, like, Google has built their own CDN, but some tech companies end up using this as a service from other people. And so, like, at the end of the day, I always felt that this will be somewhat similar inference, meaning similar to the CDNs. Like, there would be a need for a specialized cloud that is just there to run models. And then there will be a lot of demand from enterprises, businesses, including some of the big people would, I think, eventually allow their models to be served by, large inference clouds.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're drawing the analogy with content delivery networks because I guess none of the people who developed hosting software or who actually write the content are running a CDN by themselves, maybe with the exception of Google, right?
And I think it also makes sense because I'll give you an example of why this made sense to me for like the content delivery. Like, let's say a company like Walmart and Target, they would want their websites to be very fast and load well for like all their consumers in each place. But it doesn't make sense for each of them to kind of build their own infrastructures, buy some servers in every city. And so the CDN is this kind of neutral ground that does this for both of them. And then the actual server of, let's say, a CDN might actually host like images from Walmart and Target and serve to the same customers.
And neither Walmart nor Target cares.
Yeah. It's an efficient way to do this. And I think the same thing applies to inference. Like we would host, let's say, DeepSeek on our GPUs, and then multiple companies can access the same model and make requests to it. And their requests will run in parallel onto the same GPUs. So that's why I like the CDN analogy a lot.
Yeah, of course, of course. But then your moat for deep infra, like how do you compete and keep your competition, sustainable, is a very different hypothesis than the moats that the model providers would have.
Yes, I spent like 10 years in my previous career building like backend and infrastructure services, and I wanted to build a company that kind of uses some of the strengths, some of the things we've learned, me and the team, from these previous experiences. And so we feel like to build an efficient inference cloud, you have to own and operate the cards, and you have to produce the tokens efficiently. It means like you have to be able to do more tokens per card per hour than other people. And there's a lot of other aspects, time to first token, latency. So you have to kind of strike a good balance. And it's, again, similar to the CDNs, right? They have to serve a lot of content. That's kind of roughly how they make money, like number of requests and number of bytes they push.
And so your team, I think you mentioned you have about 20 people on your team. I understand they're mostly engineers, right?
Yes, very engineering heavy company.
The smartest people that help you bring down your cost advantage. I'm not sure this is for public consumption, but I think you mentioned striving after a 20% cost advantage over some of the competition. Is that in the right ballpark?
There's a wide variety of things that I think are like competitive or alternative to what we do. On one hand, we help bring these open source models to production. And the true competitors of the open source models, I think, are the closed source models. And they are sometimes almost an order of magnitude more expensive. But as I said, they're smarter, they're better models. Like if you're trying to do something really hard and expensive, let's say replacing a software engineer or augmenting a software engineer, people are willing to pay the extra for like the extra 5% because it really saves the time. But there's a lot of tasks that this is not important, right? Like both models are already like completing the tasks like 99.9% of the time. So you don't need to use like the more expensive ones in those.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the market evolve there at this point in time? I mean, who do you actually serve as customers? Who are your core customers that you talk to, and how do you see them respond to these different offerings in the marketplace, and where to choose what?
I think the market for open source models inference is still kind of developing, because if you're a large enterprise, right, I think your first step, and you've not done any like inference before, right? Then your first steps into this space would probably be using like a model from like Google or Anthropic. So our customers and the people we like to focus are mostly startups, maybe mid-market companies, but they're building like AI first products. So they're not trying to add a little bit of AI to like their existing SaaS, their existing like price thing. They are like asking this question like, now that we have AI, if we wanted to do X, how do we do it? And like the AI is like 80% of the thing, meaning,
So like the native AI companies, that's what we call them in this space, right?
yeah. So they are really focused on, to them, the inference is like really, really important. Like it's basically the most important thing for their company. And they look for a partner like us that has the infrastructure, that has the team, that has the APIs and the product to just hand off some of this execution to us while still maintaining a lot of flexibility of being able to switch to the latest models as they come out, being able to adjust how the models run to their needs. So that's where we focus on. It's not as much on the demand side. One of our advisors likes to say that there's infinite demand for AI.
It's the gold rush feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you have customers coming to you. You don't need to go and hunt for customers, like people find you.
We are one of the largest inference providers on OpenRouter.
Yeah.
We have very wide selection of models. We are kind of a cost leader. We do believe that a lot of customers care about like the price per token. If you're building this AI native thing, right?
Yeah,
You
it's a
can
huge
think of
cost
it
then,
as
right? Yeah.
it's a big cost for you. It's the biggest cost, but you also want to build a product that's useful to someone, and you can, if we give you lower cost, you can afford more tokens. Let me
Yeah.
put it this way,
Hmm.
and or smarter tokens. And so what I've seen come over like the last 2 years is the more we lower the cost of particular models, then the customers would basically jump to a better, bigger model. The interesting thing about open source models is there's big variety.
Yeah,
And once people like a model and they build something with it, some of them try to move to newer models, but some of them are like happy with it. They just want to run this one.
I see. Okay. Hmm.
And so we think that having a good variety of models available to people, it's kind of what makes for a good inference platform. So that's what we think it's important, like to have a good selection of the latest models, but also maintain like the big models for long periods of time, to have stability for like the developers building on top of it.
Is it part of your offering to help developers select the right model, or is it just to offer all of them and they should find their own sources, which one is the one for them that fits them best?
Not in the way where like we build like some sort of like black box that picks the model for you. I think the sophisticated teams are very particular about the model, and we try to mostly just educate people about like the different models,
Yeah,
not as much on like we believe they're intelligent enough, and they have their own kind of reasons. Some of them fine tune the particular models, they run custom versions. And so I sometimes worry that there is like too much selection,
yeah.
and developers get a little bit overwhelmed. But this is how open source things work. There's like variety in them.
Yeah, is it maybe a bit of a function of like what target group you have in mind? You seem to be like really targeting the people who are already specialists in AI, who come with the knowledge.
It's a bit of a self-selection, right? Like we are good at producing tokens at scale, and so the people who care about that also come in and look for that.
Nikola, I love the business proposition and I love how successful you guys are. So how big could this become?
I'm not saying this just as like a founder of an inference cloud. I do believe like we're gonna, like 5-10 years from now, like a lot of companies kind of budgets will be mostly dominated by inference. It's
Yeah,
just the nature of the models. Instead of hiring like 1,000 people, now you can maybe do with 200, and then the other, I guess, spend goes into inference. So this could get really big. We just need, I guess, for our particular success, we need continued supply of open source models.
Yep. So that the market doesn't shut off in a way, right? Like it's not like being taken back in-house by all the three great players.
My like worst case is I think open source models are like 10-20% of the overall business. And the best case is that they're like 80%.
Yeah. So
Either
that's the
way,
big bet you're making. Yeah.
there's going to be a good amount of area to explore, even if we're stuck at the 20% of open source versus closed source.
That's very good. Last two questions. One is tell us a little bit more about what led you to become this successful founder. You already mentioned you grew up in Sofia, Bulgaria, right? Were a math wizard as a child. Tell me a little bit more about what you were like as a child and a teenager. What would have predicted that you were going to be a successful founder one day?
I liked math, and then that's how I got into programming. So I did a lot of programming competitions in Bulgaria. It was just I enjoyed the certainty of writing a piece of software, a small piece of code, a small program that can take some inputs and produces some outputs, and you can kind of test it and make sure it's like actually correct and fast. Um, I randomly ended up in the US a little bit like my sister applied to go to study in the US.
Yeah.
And then once she went, like my parents were like, "Oh, look, you know, she's very happy there. It's very nice. So why don't you apply?" And okay, I will. So I ended up in a US school. I went to Northwestern. Interesting enough, my sister basically, graduated and went back to Bulgaria, but I ended up kind of
Saying.
staying and coming to the Bay Area. I did 3 internships, 2 at a startup and 1 at Microsoft.
Okay.
And I really loved working at the startup. I was like their first intern the first summer. Next summer, there was like a few other people. Things changed, but like whatever I did, I felt like I'm actually contributing to the product more. Because when I had my big tech internship, I was given a project. It was an interesting project, but at the end of the day, it was more of a research thing, not something that ended up actually in production.
Last question, Nikola. What would be your advice to somebody who is behind you in their journey in starting a company? Maybe they just started, maybe they're just figuring out where to focus their time and energy. What's your best startup advice to younger founders behind you?
Actually, quite hard and difficult to build a startup. Even if things go really well, it's still a lot of work and a lot of uncertainty. You just have to be okay with the uncertainty. Startups, they need to just try things quickly, but you have to also just think about all the time, like what is kind of the most important thing for us to do today and focus on that.
Super prioritization. I love it. Very good. Nikola, where can people reach you if they want to hear more about Deep Infra or just to be in touch?
Yeah, I'm not the best at social networking, but check our website. You can drop us an email. You can find us on X.
Yeah.
I guess.
Very good. And when people are already in touch with me and they want an introduction to Nikola, then I'm of course also happy to provide. So Nikola, this was amazing. Thank you for joining the Scaling Without Breaking podcast. And for the audience, we will have another amazing guest for you again next week. Keep scaling without breaking.
The Scaling Without Breaking podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.